This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Dads from the Crypt podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz.
And I'm Gil Adler.
On this episode of Crypt and Crypt Again, we're going to talk about the fact that Tales from the Crypt is about to be celebrated. This is so exciting, at the Chattanooga Film Festival this year.
And we're both going to be there.
We are both going to be there. It's June 23rd to the 29th, but it's the 23rd, 24th, 25th. That's the live events. I've never been to Chattanooga. Have you ever been to Chattanooga?
I've been to Nashville, but I've never been to Chattanooga. But I'm told it's really quite lovely. It's really quite beautiful. It's a 2-hour ride from Nashville by car, so it's not that far.
Apparently the Chattanooga Film Festival, and by the way, I'm just going to point out for the benefit of our listeners and anyone watching this week's episode, this is it, everybody. This is it. It's us. We're going to talk about the Chattanooga Film Festival, which and the fact that we're celebrating Tales from the Crypt, and we'll talk about the things that are going to happen there. And the festival itself, it just sounds like it's going to be awesome. Then we're going to talk about the writer's strike and some insight into really why this is going to go on for quite a long time. We'll get there. Good news, bad news, but good news first. All right, the Chattanooga Film Festival, this is their 10th year, and it's their first year since the pandemic of returning to live action. That's the first couple days. As their press release says, their humble celebration of cinematic strangeness, which that's really appealing. That's I think why they reached out to us, because they're into cinematic strangeness, was recently named by Movie Maker magazine as one of the top 25 coolest film festivals in the world.
So if you're available and you can get there, get there.
Even virtually. The festival is going to be held at various locations around Chattanooga, but the main venue is going to be the historic and legendary haunted the Reed House Hotel. Apparently, room 311 has a resident ghost named Annalisa.
Oh, so that's why they put us in 311. I see.
There you go. They specialize in 1920s splendor while catering to modern tastes. The Reed House is a dazzling jazz-era gem with the trappings of a new hotel. 240-room historic getaway boasts soaring lobby ceilings and dramatic chandeliers, checkered floors, gleaming wood-clad walls. I'm so excited. I wonder if they're putting us up at the Reed House Hotel. They haven't told us that part yet.
They haven't told us that. My suspicion is, no, that's where the event will be placed. We'll be in some lean-to in the park somewhere.
Featured, they're going to have 40-plus feature-length films that will screen, some virtually, and live during the opening weekend. They've also got 30 or so short films. They described the whole experience as a cinema tsunami. It really, if you love movies and independent movie making, especially toward the strange part of the spectrum, that's really what the Chattanooga Film Festival really is about. It's like the most independent of the independents, with a special appreciation for horror, which is kind of where we come in. Among the world premieres is going to be a little feature called Sour Party from filmmakers Amanda Drexton and Michael Drexton. This is one of the programming team's favorite debut features of the festival. It centers around, the film centers around Gwen, played by Samantha Westervelt, and James, played by Amanda Drexton. Two flailing 30-something besties that are as broke as they are self-absorbed. When circumstances set the duo out on a bizarre odyssey across Los Angeles to correct depths, stuff happens. This features delightful appearances from Reggie Watts. I'm not sure who that is, I'm afraid, and Corey Feldman.
We know Corey Feldman really well.
I wonder if Corey will be there.
Well, it sure would be nice to reconnect with Corey. We haven't seen him in quite some time. So he is at the festival. That'll be a real nice celebration.
Yeah, if Corey's there, I that would be swell. They've got another premiere that they're excited about is called Tearsucker by Stephen Vanderpool, director, and the writer star Sam Britton. A haunting rumination on toxic masculinity about a psychopath who feeds on women's tears. It's described as being filled with Lynchian tone shifts. That it sounds really compelling. I don't know that we're going to have time to see a lot of these ourselves. Our own events are pretty
packed.
They will pay tribute to the iconic horror anthology series Tales from the Crypt. Among the special events, the celebration will kick off with a pop-up comic shop salute to the series' bloody beginnings in the pages of EC Comics, conjured from the depths of darkness by the folks at Infinity Flux Comics, who are one of their partners in the film festival this year. So yeah, and it does all start with the EC Comics, which we'll talk about shortly. Next up is a special live episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast.
I want to see that.
Why, damn! It says it's hosted by two people that know the Crypt all too well. Longtime Tales from the Crypt writers, directors, producers, Gil Adler, that's you, and A.L. Katz, that's me. And it does point out that our podcast was named the best film podcast of 2022 by Entertainment Weekly. And it centers around the infamous hellish experience they had making Bordello of Blood. Which brings us to the next activity. The salute continues with the Bordello of Blood live commentary. And that will be presented by Diabolic DVD. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Diabolic DVD, wherein Adler and Katz will give insight into how they found themselves in the impossible situation that the studio forced them into of making a film that nobody wanted.
So just to clarify that a little bit for the audience, we're going to be screening the movie and stop and go and commenting on things that happened along the way, or what happened that day, or how we got through it, or what didn't happen.
Let's go back a whole step. Since the movie, all right, you and I have never seen this movie together.
Correct.
This is the movie that ended our partnership. Really, at the end of the day, the stresses of making this and the compromises that were made, it started a series of events that, that oddly enough, the podcast about making Bordello of Blood, it began the process of healing all those wounds, or wounding all those heals. I'm not entirely sure which, but that Bordello of Blood is being celebrated at the film festival, that we are going to watch it together for the first time after doing the podcast about it. Should be fascinating.
Interesting.
And I say that simply, look, we're going to have an audience. I don't know. I can't, however they're going to do it, they will perceive it as they perceive it. But as one of the participants in this piece of live kabuki, this should be fascinating because this was such a painful experience to make. We have reconnected both our friendship and our creative partnership.
Yep.
This is one particular stress we have not put on the reconnection, which is, all right, sitting through and remembering days, because the strange thing is when you make a movie, it's impossible to ever watch a scene without thinking of the actual, oh, on that day I remember this. You never see it from this side. You're always seeing it from the other side, and all the shit you had to go through to survive that moment, and then all the shit that happened afterwards. This should be a fascinating experience as one of its participants. Speaking that way.
So let's just set some ground rules for the two of us. There's no punching. There's no slapping.
I think we've fortunately through this podcast, through the season 1, the first 5 episodes, as we describe it at one point in season 2, the whole schmear. The story of the making of Bordello of Blood was a series of understandable, well, I see why that happened, and I see why that happened, and I see why that happened. And suddenly, I don't know that they're best of intentions, but understandable intentions become a kind of rolling tragedy.
Yeah, out of control.
And it's an object lesson sometimes in how mediocrity happens. For Gil and I, and why this is so key. We were supposed to do, and this is also part of what the festival is going to celebrate. We were supposed to do a whole other second Tales from the Crypt feature film. Let's go back another step. We were so, we'll pat ourselves on the back, we were so successful at bringing Tales from the Crypt back from the dead that not only did we revive the series, but because we revived the Crypt Keeper, Universal Pictures said, hey, let's make 3 feature films. Here's the mandate. They all need to be entirely different. The first one, Gil was offered to direct. The first one, it was Demon Knight. Gil, as we've described in the podcast, Gil did not want to direct that particular movie. And so it was agreed that Gil would direct the second. And so we had spent a great deal of time finding a project that we really liked and adapting it and taking it to a place that it really spoke. It spoke to us, it spoke for us, and it spoke to our ambitions as filmmakers. And it was called Dead Easy. And Universal must have been down with it because, hey, they bought the script,
and they financed it, and yeah. we were out on location with about 5 to 8 crew people, spending a lot of money in New Orleans, looking at locations, nailing things down, hiring crew. I mean, so they were definitely in, and we were spending money.
Hey, how do you know they're in?
The That's how you know the studio is in.
Yeah.
They keep spending money. Keep spending money.
Yeah,
which we did until we got that phone call.
Come home. You're not making this movie anymore. You're making this other thing called Bordello of Blood. And by the way, production, your release schedule hasn't changed. You're still starting this movie in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so sight unseen, we had 3 weeks to start making a movie called Bordello of Blood for reasons that had nothing to do with us.
Well, we really should have just said no. And I think that's the biggest lesson. And that's the biggest comment I think we can both make to young filmmakers today in terms of what they make. And I think we were sort of hoodwinked into making a movie that we both didn't believe in, didn't love, didn't feel the passion. And, we didn't want to let it go. And we should have.
We went from what would have been our dream project, Dead Easy.
Yeah.
To making the ultimate nightmare. Yeah. And it really it destroyed everything. It is the story itself makes for a great story, which, hey, that's our podcast. But fortunately that's part of what the Chattanooga Film Festival folks would like to celebrate. And when we do the live commentary track, a lot of the stuff that we have just described to you, the raging emotions of what it did, the ripple effects from, looking at days on, there are things that happened on set that, well, then this happened, then that happened, and this, oh my God, it rippled. It rippled through my my fucking life. Oh my God, like a bullet. Oh my God, they just kept ricocheting and hitting me.
That's
And
why it'd be fun if Corey was actually there. Maybe we can convince him to give us some comments about what he experienced.
oh, that would be oh, I mean, we'd love to have Corey do the podcast. Corey, we'd love to have you sit in. We've tried. I've reached out to Corey and has as yet have not heard back from Corey. If you hear this or someone who knows Corey hears this and will reach out to Corey, we will have such an embracing conversation. That's what we're after here. We loved working with you, man. The couple of times that we worked together, we thought the world of you. You are a consummate pro.
Yeah. He was great. He was just a delight.
Yeah. We only want to talk about what you want to talk about, man. Well, I'd love to talk about a whole other bunch of stuff, but it's just me. Anyway, finally, the last thing that we are scheduled to do at the Chattanooga Film Festival. I'll read from what they have here. As we once returned Sam Jones's voice to Flash Gordon, the Chattanooga Film Festival aims to right yet another cinematic wrong with a live script reading of the pair's Never Made Dead Easy, with a cast of your genre film favorites.
And perhaps the best thing, or the thing that I'm most interested in doing, is we're going to have, I think it's a luncheon now, with veterans who want to be filmmakers or who are filmmakers.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And we're going to have a roundtable conversation of what, we went through and how we got involved and what they might be doing, and answer their questions and see if we can be of aid to these veterans who have interest in the film and television community, whatever role they think they have in mind. That'll be fun too.
That's our fourth event.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump back to the script reading. Of course, we did an earlier reading of Dead Easy for the Motion Picture Home back in December. We were able to pull together Sean Astin, Jake Busey, Tia Carrera, Brett Cullen, Chelsea Rebecca, Leslie Zemeckis, and John Kassir. What Chattanooga wants to do, what their innovation is, the genre film actors that are going to be reading the parts this time. And as with before, I'll be your humble narrator. I wonder if in time we'll end up doing the Dead Easy table read so many times that there'll be a demand that someone make this goddamn movie and shut these people up. And that plus our sit down with the veterans should be a jam-packed 72 hours on the ground. It's like an intelligence operation, moving us in, moving us out.
Yeah, they got us going and coming and operating full time.
Indeed.
But it's good. I'm really looking forward to it. And anybody out there who's in the neighborhood or can get to Chattanooga, please join us. And if you can't, look up the Chattanooga Film Festival and see how you can participate virtually.
Yeah. We promise you that our events will be entirely spontaneous, and what you see is what you get. And for that, we humbly apologize. So that was the good news portion of this episode. The bad news portion is we on strike.
And we can't write anything. Well, we can write, but we can't write for anybody that wants to pay us.
We cannot write for any signatory companies.
The strike has taken an incredible toll, not only in Hollywood, not only in New York, not only in Vancouver or Toronto, but literally all over the world, because everything that requires a writer has shut down.
Yeah.
And appropriately so, I might say, in terms of my opinion, because the stakes of what's at risk are really just enormous this time. Much different than all other strikes in the past.
It was the last strike 15 years ago was really is the prelude to this. It was the warm-up act, and it was because of what the writers did not get and we're not going to get. That's kind of at the root of this particular strike, and it's why this strike is going to go on for quite a while, into the fall at least. The last strike, I can just tell you historically, at that particular point, that was a bunch of years after Gil and I had stopped being partners, and I had done a bunch of seasons on Outer Limits. And Gil has talked in the podcast about, he went on to. Gil had a tremendous career. Gil you produced the tentpole movies at Warner Brothers for
a number of years. Yeah.
Alan Horn was it? Alan Horn would call you and say, "Here are the tentpoles. Read them. Which one do you want to do?"
Yeah, that's what happened after I did a movie in Australia called Ghost Ship when I came back. And so, he and then Lorenzo de Bonaventura, who was really running motion picture division. Alan was the chairman of the whole company. They really treated me really well and invited me
and as well, they should have. One of the things that I will say about my partner Gil, he is one of the best producers on the planet. The man knows how to produce a movie, a TV show. And not just, it's not just a question of the money. It's a question of the money and the vision.
Thanks for saying that. A lot of people don't understand about the producer. I mean, they think it's just the guy who gets the money or is responsible for the money, but it filters into every aspect of the process of the motion picture, and for me, getting into writing and getting into directing was really a way for me to become a better producer, because I felt if I could write, or if I could co-write, or if I could direct, then I could understand those problems and I could bring solutions, some of which might be good, some of which they might hate, but at least I could talk to the writer and the director about, okay, how about this or how about that, as opposed to in those days, especially, and I think it continues today, producers would just say, hey, you got to fix this. We only have so many hours left and it's not going to happen. So you go back there and do what you have to do. You and I took a very different position, and we became participants and collaborators with our directors and our other writers to say, okay, what's the problem? Why can't we figure this out? And we did. And we figured it out in the writing, which then enabled us to make our days on a consistent basis that very few people really understand even today how we did that. And to me, it's the most obvious and easiest thing in the world.
If you had been around during the classic studio years of Hollywood, you would have been a David O. Selznick.
I still could be.
What?
I still could be.
Well,
anybody that wants to call me David O. Selznick.
But what I mean is, that was a guy who the studios trusted with the big movie.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the money. It was the vision. Yeah. It was taste. It was a sense of how to do it from every angle you could look at it. And look, the studio is always looking, are we going to make some money? And they'll walk away happy too, because they'll make the money and their stockholders will be happy.
Yeah.
It's a really hard job, hard to do, but hard to do successfully. More than once, man, anyone can get lucky.
Yeah.
Twice. Yeah. Okay. After you've done it a couple times, as Mr. Adler has, it's part of your skill set.
Thanks.
It's just a fact of life. Gil, writing was not what Gil relied upon. Gil had skill sets for which he was eminently employable, and man, why would you not? And so so he had a safety net underneath him. I had nothing beneath me after our partnership dissolved, and other issues that had nothing to do with anyone outside my own head. I was not confident enough to come up with content myself, and that kind of drove me into a hole. Be that as it may, when I in the lead up to the last strike, I did have a couple things going on, and I had formed a couple of partnerships with one or two other people, because I could not I could not originate material out of my own head. And so I would gravitate, I would be, well, I was represented at that time by a company called The Agency, an agency called The Agency, run by a big Hollywood macher named Jerry Zeit. And my agent was a guy named Nick Mechanic. But Jerry represented, among other people, a guy named Tom Sullivan. And Tom was a well-known blind person. He still is. I think Tom is still with us. And Tom had become famous as an actor, as a writer, as a singer. He had, oh gosh, he was rather well known for a number of things. And as agencies like to do, they hooked Tom and me up. And Tom had written, Tom's story was that he had been, he was born, he wasn't born blind, but shortly after he was blind, something happened at the hospital and he was deprived of oxygen. And his father was this larger than life Irishman from Boston who ran guns and gin for Joe Kennedy. And Tom ended up at the Perkins School for the Blind in Boston, which is where Helen Keller went. When Tom was 12 years old, one night he coaxed two of his friends to break out. And the Coast Guard caught Tom and his two blind friends in the middle of Boston Harbor in a rowboat. And for that, Tom was thrown out of Perkins School for the Blind. Tom wanted never to go back. Tom's father wanted him to go back. Tom was determined to live with the normies. And the story of this book, Adventures in Darkness, is about that summer when he tried to convince his parents that he could survive in the blind world, in the sighted world. And his father was determined to prove him wrong. And so his father, because he had influence in various places, got Tom onto the Little League team as pitcher. And Tom struck someone out because he figured out a way for the catcher just pounded the mitt. Tom knew where to throw the ball and he trained. And so he muscle memoried and he knew that's what move this around. And so Tom figured that out. And unfortunately, the guy who he struck out challenged him. And Tom ultimately had to box this kid. And so Tom's father, not having made his point the first time, set up the boxing match, hoping that this bully would beat the shit out of Tom and drive the point home. You're not. And Tom won. Tom took a bit of a beating, but after a while, the bully slowed down and his breathing got really clear. And so Tom just zeroed in on the breathing and he delivered one uppercut right to where the sound was coming from, knocked the kid out. And so this is the story, so they put me together with Tom to see if we would spark and, that I would figure out how to adapt Tom's story, which we did. And so Tom and I enjoyed, it was fascinating to have Tom as a friend. Tom, among his other recreations, he skied. And there are quite a few blind skiers, but Tom he was like, whenever he possibly could, he just loved it. He also was a huge Lakers fan. And this was during the Shaq Kobe run of championships. And Tom and I would talk about Lakers games. And sometimes I would say to Tom afterwards, dude, okay, you got to fess up. You are faking this blind shit, right? You are faking it. You cannot possibly have the feel for the game that you have without seeing anything. Anyway, so Tom and I, as the writer's strike was looming, we had written a spec script called Blind Spot, about a cop who falls for a blind woman, doesn't realize she's setting him up. She's a con artist and setting him up to take a huge fall. She is his blind spot, is the cop's blind spot. We had a really good director attached, Alan Rudolph. We had a really good producer named Mary Allo, really going to battle for us. Battle in Seattle, just did a movie recently called Marlowe that Neil Jordan directed. We were in the process of trying to attach our talent, and the writer's strike happened, and it never came back together. And it was so close. And for me, that would have been the okay, man, you're
Yeah.
back in the game. You're back in the game. You're back in the game.
Yeah.
And the writer's strike, nothing came back. Nothing. So these strikes come with, and costs that are considerable to those who are going to walk the picket lines. And during the last strike, I believed in the causes as I do now. Yes, absolutely. I was a strike captain, and I was an organizer, and worked, ran the picket line at Paramount. Um, I really enjoyed that. My kids would come visit me when they were little. They were very young on the picket line. I have photos of Tristan and Bianca both walking with me. They were little teeny tiny tots. 15 years ago, they were Tristan's 24, 9 and 6,
Wow.
walking the picket line with me, and proudly.
Well, I think there are a lot of people with similar stories in terms of how projects didn't happen because of the strike, and it affected as well as the directors. And with this one, I think we're going to see the directors joining in like in another week or two, and then SAG is going to join in.
Now,
And
let's talk about the way that because the way the same dynamic from the previous strike is operating here. The companies, the studios have set up they've arranged the negotiations in a particular pattern for a particular reason.
Mhm.
And it's always the Writers Guild first. And it's always with the expectation that the Writers Guild are going to be the biggest assholes of all. And we're gonna want this, and we're gonna want that, and the studio will throw up their hands at the crazy writers. They want the world, they want the moon and the stars. They'll negotiate with the Directors Guild, and they'll have an easier time with negotiating with the Directors Guild, mostly because the majority of the member of the Directors Guild, they're not directors, they're first assistant directors, second assistant directors, production managers. That's the bulk of the writers of the Directors Guild. And while they get residuals from projects, they don't get the kind of residuals that writers and creative directors get. It's a whole other, it's a piece of the actual rights upon which the whole enterprise is based. And so what the writers are negotiating is something that most of the DGA has no interest in. They've got no dog in that hunt. They've got no interest in it whatsoever. And the same goes for SAG, the next in line for the negotiation. Yeah, they get residuals, but it's performance. It has nothing to do with the original rights at the core. And this is why the writers and the producers have always been at odds with each other, and why the producers despise the writers as much as they need them. They can't do anything without us. Without fade in, without the words, you don't have anything. Now, the part of the problem is that filmmaking, yeah, you can truthfully say it's not really a writer's medium. The film doesn't really come together until many other elements are added to the mix. The actual film, sound, lots of other things. The script, really a screenplay, to be absolutely fair about what this particular kind of writing is a floor plan. It's architectural plans for a building that the writer really will have some things to do with, but not much. And yes, there is a case to be made that a director is the organizing principle around which certainly a feature film, a one-off piece of entertainment, yes, someone has to be the decider, and because there's no studio system running it anymore, that power ultimately, thank you, Andrew Saris, and his theories about directors, we all came to believe that the director is God. When Gil's directing, he's God, but that's otherwise, they're all full of shit.
Oh, now you say it. Where were you there 25 years ago? You weren't saying it then.
Man, I wasn't feeling it then either. Yeah, what that's worth.
Getting back to the writers, I think the issues that they're facing are much greater and much more substantial and have much more lasting effect. You and I talked a while back, and we said, we made our show Tales from the Crypt for HBO. Had that show been made for some other company, not a cable company, we would have been paid more money initially for the writing, and we would have paid more on the residuals.
Oh gosh,
but because it was cable, those rates and those scales were much lower. And now you bring in the streamers, and the streamers who basically feel that they control, and they probably do, everything, are now looking and going, well, we want to make all the money, and we want to pay less to the writers and the directors and the actors. And to be actual about this, anybody else who's going to take any money from us. And so you're looking at these companies, and in the past, if you historically look at the companies, they've made profits excessive year in and year out.
Always.
And they just get bigger and bigger. And the streaming companies, same thing. They're getting and making more and more money. And really
that's what they tell their shareholders.
Yeah. And really what they're doing is, in the meantime, they're taking it away from the writers and the directors and the actors, all of whom, without, you have nothing.
The argument that they made to the writers, and again, the intention through these negotiations is, all right, everyone thinks the writers are assholes asking for too much. The directors, they make the deal with the Directors Guild, because the directors right off the bat, usually, I don't know if that's going to happen this time, but the directors usually go along, they slot right in, and SAG usually, they might fidget a bit, as they did last time with the Writers Guild, but ultimately the pressure from it all caved in on us, and we gave in. And we didn't get very much. The companies made the argument then, let's see, back then, the technological advancement was DVDs. Yeah, it was DVDs were just beginning to take off, and no one knew. The argument was, no one knows if this technology is going to succeed or fail. It's too soon to say. Let's agree to have a look again. It's horseshit. These people have already spent the money because they anticipate making the money. And so as they're negotiating with us, they're already lying, because they already have things picked out that they're going to buy. They know that much money is going to come. It's like the casino telling you, oh no, man, we could lose on this. No, this is a stacked casino, and the casino always wins. And that's the negotiation. That's really the starting point. Writing for a living is tricky under the best of circumstances. All right, let's say that you're working utterly freelance, feature films. In the feature film world, hey, man, getting something set up was hard back. Now it's even harder now, because the feature business is dying. It is a dying concern. Really, it's big movies and little teeny intimate dramas that ultimately are streaming movies. There's no in between, and the studios don't know how to make those movies anymore. So from the writing point of view, is there a living to be made as a screenwriter? Certainly not. What are you going to sell? You might sell something every couple of years. You can't live on that. You can't plan a life. You can't. No, that's not. You can't live like that. TV was always, hey, if you want to be a workaday writer, TV was wonderful that way. There are guys who didn't give a toss about doing features, lived their whole lives doing doing 3-camera comedies, and they own they own things these days. Um, the way that, and I think to understand the economics that we're talking about now, we all look back at the economics of the past, and the economics, features will always be what features are. They want to base it on the budget. Okay, all right. The TV was always where really the big money was, and more so now than ever. In the old days when Gil and I were first doing this and taking shows out and pitching them, there was a magic number, 65. And a show had to be good for 65 episodes in order to even walk in the door. The reason was this. A TV show on its first run on a television network is not going to make back what it cost to make it. Well, I guess it could, but it wouldn't look very good. Nobody would like it. Nobody would watch it. So there's a thing called the deficit. And as you make a bunch of TV episodes, that deficit becomes quite something. So you need a deficit partner. And so in order for the TV show to become profitable, you got to cover the deficit. Once the deficit is paid, now you're into profitability. So the only way to cover that was through secondary sales in the syndication market. And hey, that's why shows like MASH and everything Dick Wolf ever made, and lots of shows from the 50s, Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy, you could syndicate them because it's not sequential. You can watch them out of order. It doesn't make any difference. The whole notion of 65 is that people can, 65, let's go to 65. An advertising cycle in TV is 13 weeks. You're going to syndicate a show that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So 5 days a week times a 13-week ad cycle gives you 65. So in order to syndicate, you had to have 65 episodes that you could watch out of sequence, close-ended storytelling. In essence, from a creator's point of view, it's the same joke with 65 variations. But that was the trick. That's what you were going to pitch. Because really the question that they were going to ask is, there's 65 in it? Because if there's not, we ain't going to make our money. Get the fuck out of the room. So our whole nature of thinking was 65. And then what the networks would do to help that process along, they would make big orders here in America. They would order 22s, 25s. And so that was a season. So it would take you 2 seasons and change. You'd be over the magic line and hopefully into profitability. So a successful show had to run at least 2-3 seasons, get into its 3rd season, really to get into, to know it was going to be profitable. All right. In terms of how you tell that many stories, because now you're doing 22 variations on the theme every year. Wow, it takes, one person can't do that. You need a bunch of people. You need a room full of writers. You need a writer's room. And so, because this is a factory town, Hollywood's a factory town. We didn't invent movie making in Hollywood. We invented the factory process of movie making, of how to spit them out like a really good, viable commercial product. And we've simply applied this tremendously, it's trying to be economical, it's trying to be efficient. These efficiencies keep getting applied and keep getting applied.
That was the way it was done.
Right.
And then came in first DVD.
HBO, and then HBO changed it.
Yeah.
That was, by contrast, the BBC never had to worry about any such thing, because it was all paid for by license fees that people who watched the TV show, it's like a subscription. It is a subscription. And so that's how, and so they didn't have to worry about making a number of episodes to pay for the whole thing. It was already paid for. And so Fawlty Towers has 6, 7, 8 episodes total. And that's it. And And then the BBC discovered a secondary market where it became actually profitable because they sold videos and then DVDs and yeah, these were. But this is part of the argument. These were not anticipated at the time that the Monty Python folk wrote it. Gosh, I expect they're being compensated as part of their deal. But if it wasn't written into the contract, it's entirely possible that they're not. I'm sure they're being compensated. But this is where the contracts become super, super important. The technology that we were facing in the last strike was DVDs, and they told us, all right, a new technology happened this time, streaming. Now, HBO, like the BBC, was a subscription model. So our budget for Tales from the Crypt came from subscribers, people who watched our TV show. In essence, they paid for our TV show. It was great. And that's kind of the way that Netflix is doing it. That's exactly the way that Netflix is doing it. The problem is when in the old days, how they would judge the success of a show was with the Nielsen's ratings. And HBO also would, I think they, for a while, I don't know if they pay for Nielsen ratings anymore. I don't think they care anymore about that kind of thing. Netflix measures what its audience wants down to really the minutia of who they are. Netflix knows exactly who's watching its shows pretty much at every fucking moment. They won't tell us. They will not share that information who's watching with the people making the content. And that's the problem, because you can't tell us, first of all, they can't tell us that they're hurting for money because they're telling their stockholders something else entirely. You're publicly traded companies. We can always look at your books. The problem is, without the people writing this stuff, those eyeballs would not be showing up and paying the $9.95, well, it's up to $15 a month now, I think, for full-on Netflix. Well, people go to Netflix because you have certain shows that the other streamers don't. How can you possibly say that the people who wrote the material that people are watching en masse are not entitled to greater compensation? This lack of transparency is unacceptable, because, as is always the case, the guys with the money are thieves. Just how it is. Pigs at the trough. I said my piece.
Well, yeah, and I think it's not just that, but the other issues of AI.
Oh, yeah.
The other issues of, okay, what is going to be the next iteration of Netflix or Disney Plus or the streamers? Where's that going to go?
Yeah.
Years ago, someone was telling me this the other day. Blockbuster was offered to buy Netflix, and they decided not to. They turned it down.
They didn't see a future in it. They didn't see a future
in it. They saw a future in the DVDs, but they didn't see a future in Netflix. And now look where we are. And so I think what's most important to the writers, and I suspect to the directors and the actors as well, is what happens in the future with some of these other new inventions like AI.
Yeah.
What happens when you replace the writer because you just talk to the AI and say, give me a script, or you go to a director and there's no director, it's just a program, or the actor is reproduced somehow. And I think that's not happening tomorrow, but I think the fear of that happening sometime in the future is what is motivating a conversation which includes AI. It's not totally about AI, but it certainly needs to include AI in this conversation. And that's why I think a lot of people are saying, well, the strike is going to end in August. And I think the strike is going to go much longer.
Hmm.
I could see it going through the end of the year
Yeah, quite
because there are just so many issues and there's so many unknowns, and these guys don't want to deal with it.
one thing that a computer will never be able to do is laugh at itself. It really, it will, the closest it can come is Hal.
Mhm.
But in order to laugh at oneself, one really has to be able to see the the absurdity, the absurdities that life often present to someone who is sentient. When you bump into the contradictions of life and living, uh, a computer can be aware that these contradictions exist, but it can't experience them in a way that a human does. Because at the end of the day, a computer always has one of two choices: the circuit's open or the circuit's closed.
Mhm.
It never really lives in that fog of indecision that excuse me, the fog of indecision that can haunt human beings.
Mhm.
Computers don't have that. They can't have that. Uh, and because they can't have human relationships, they can never experience what it is to miss your father.
Right,
You never got to say certain things.
but just to go back to the issue that we're talking about, which is the strike and the Writers Guild and the other guilds, um, there is concern about that by all the writers and everybody in the industry. On the management side, they're thinking, "Oh, this would be great. We wouldn't have to pay." And on the writer side or the director side, "Oh my God, it's to the elimination of us." And I think we don't know enough about AI to be able to say, "Oh, we don't have to worry about it," and so let that just be.
But
And
what I'm suggesting is that artificial is always the first part of what it is: artificial
yeah,
intelligence,
yeah,
and it's simply a fact of life. It cannot replace, it can't have human experience, and so it can't describe human experience. I'm simply my my arguing point, my starting point is that you can try your damnedest to replace human writers with artificial intelligence.
mhm.
You will fail. And I'm telling them upfront, here's why you're going to fail: because yeah, certain kinds of entertainment, it does not matter.
Right. But
You know,
then I understand the empathy. But I think the issue for writers right now and management in dealing with not only the other issues about streaming and money and residuals, but it's about where does AI go, to how far is it allowed to go, and how is it controlled, and how does it enhance the writing experience for the writers? That's really what the issues I think are. And that's why it's going to take longer
yes,
to
how do
solve.
we make this thing a tool and not a weapon?
Yeah.
That's really artificial intelligence has, yes, it has the potential as an add-on to a creative person. Wow, man, when I think of the shit that we could do with artificial intelligence as a creative tool, it boggles my mind. I'm not arguing against it. I'm
Yeah.
simply saying it can't replace us. I think we have to approach it as, how can we use this enhancement to the most advantage without the pitfalls that are obvious.
Well, I think what's dangerous and what's scary is that when you see leaders of big corporations coming to Congress, as they did in the last 2 weeks or so, and saying, look, let's take a breather, let's stop, let's figure out how we're going to control this AI and the development of AI, that tells us a lot in terms of what could the possibilities be. And you may very well be right about the emotion and about the, you know, what AI can't fulfill in that experience. But on the other hand, it's doing really well right now, being able to not only replicate people's what they look like or what they sound like, but also not only sound like in their voice, but sound like in how they would speak about a particular category, which, forget motion pictures. It's a bigger issue for politics and
Oh,
and
yes,
survival.
yes.
But if that's the case,
Oh, yeah.
where does that leave the motion picture and
Well,
television industry in terms of our craft?
in a sense, Napster came for us all.
True enough.
When Napster first
Yeah.
came, it
Yeah.
destroyed the music business.
Yeah.
Uh, Back in the day, a musical artist, for instance, they would tour to support their album sales because album sales that was the money. When Napster meant we could all share those music files for free, not have to buy albums that were priced at stupid prices. Uh, of course, everyone went to Napster, and suddenly that destroyed the whole way that people in the music business made money. And no one could rely on album sales anymore. Suddenly, you had to give the music away. You might as well, hoping that when you toured, you could make a few bucks.
Yeah.
That's where the music business is now. And then ultimately, it came for everyone. Really, YouTube and all the streaming services. There are a lot of Gen Zers, my kids, they don't watch any regular stuff. They might watch stuff on Netflix, but regular TV, you're out of your mind. My son watches YouTube.
Yeah.
It is a whole different world.
Yeah.
Whole different world.
Anyway, those I think are the issues that are plaguing the Writers Guild, the Directors Guild, and all the guilds. Ultimately, it'll be all the guilds.
At the end of the day, I think all the guilds will go along with us because and I think that the next negotiation up is the Directors Guild. That starts shortly.
Yeah.
Which is, this is by the book, how it's always done. And the curious thing will be to see how the DGA negotiates their rights for all these things and artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Because there's this concerns them. It's some very real skin in a very real game. And if you give away your rights too easily, you don't get them back. And then other people, they get to spend your money. And that really sucks. The Writers Guilds have learned it that really every single time we get, again, because the other guilds kind of pile up on us, we got to get back to work, man. We got to get back to work. We got to get back to work. And so we cave. If the Directors Guild is strong, you're a member of the DGA.
I am.
Be strong, brother.
Yeah. The DGA historically has always been very strong.
Yeah.
Because of the medium. I mean, it's a director's medium, as you said
earlier.
Yeah.
But whatever the Directors Guild deal is, that's usually the deal we're all going to make.
Right.
That's why they're right there in the middle. And then usually, if that's good enough for the directors, SAG goes, okay, good enough for us. And then everyone looks at the writers like we're assholes because why won't you make the same deal? Well, because we don't have the same issues. Don't you understand?
Right.
And so we're talking about two different things.
I think now the issues are going to be made much clearer, and the issues really are similar in respect to those two areas, AI and the streaming. And I think I think the directors and the writers will be more united in how it gets resolved.
If that is the case, I think that will be the shortest road to a shorter strike. Because if the DGA and the Writers Guild are simpatico and on the same page and asking for pretty much the same things, well, that's a little harder for the studios to, first of all, you can't drive a wedge between us. And then SAG, well, hey, SAG is going to climb on board the bandwagon.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, it's, hey, we can use the old barn and Joey plays the trombone. We're all putting on a show together. And except, we're waiting for the studios to make a deal.
So it's a hard time for writers right now because the strike is about a month old. Most TV shows have closed down. Most shows, even shooting, have closed down.
To the Writers Guild credit, they've gotten much better at understanding how to do this from the last strike. Now, I have not had a chance to walk the picket line yet. I've been sick the last 2 weeks, so it's kind of hard. But have not had a chance to walk the picket lines. But I certainly intend to. It's going to be a long strike, And if we learned anything from the last strike, and that was 100 days, that was 3 months and change.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of, after the first rush of people, it's all very exciting to be here. In the middle, and then the later stretches of the game, they will need people to walk the picket line then, and I will be quite ready and willing to jump in and spend my time. Right now, I'm not on active status. I'm not an active member of the Writers Guild at present because I took a 2-decade hiatus from having anything made. Mm-hmm. The Writers Guild moved me to emeritus status. That's like out to pasture. I'm out to pasture. I think that's where, if you look, if there's an icon at the Writers Guild website, there's a picture of a cow in a field. It's me out to pasture.
Well, perhaps, and we're not ready to talk about this yet, but soon on this podcast, on this very podcast, you and I are going to be talking about something that might very well change that status substantially.
Indeed,
and we'll tickle the feathers a little bit.
Yes, we will.
That coming soon, we're going to be talking about something that we're both very excited about for many different reasons.
And that is the plot twist here at the end. We're going to end on good news. Good news, right. The bad news and the good news. There's something coming from this,
these two guys,
from this pile of rubble.
Then, I think we ought to let people go.
On that, yes. Again, and on that bombshell.
Again, Chattanooga Film Festival. Look it up. Come join us. If you're in the neighborhood, again, come and join us physically, if not virtually, and we'd love to see you there. We're looking forward to it, and I guess we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time. Thank you, everyone, and hey, always good talking to you, Gil.